Unfortunately, the video explaining how I built the tail got deleted somehow, but it's a pretty simple thing. I basically used 1/4 by 1/4 balsa stock, um, just simply making a. Alright, unfortunately, the video about how I made the tail got deleted, but that's alright. Pretty simple process. I basically used 1/4 by 1/4 inch balsa stock to just make the tail like that. Um, I used normal nylon hinges just because it was more simple. I didn't have to deal with end caps with the wire hinges, and it would be problematic because here in the center is where the horn is, and it would make it floppy. It wouldn't really work. So I went with nylon hinges on the elevator and the rudder. The rudder, I went for a sort of sloped look with a angled rudder. I sort of like it. It's going to be sort of trouble having to work with this control arm since it's so like odd. It's not very, because the servo's not like right there. It's all the way down there. But yeah, that's the tail. Pretty simple. Nothing special. This is the tail boom. This was the original. Hold on. This was the original basswood spar that joined the wing to the tail, and then from there I used the 1/4 inch by 1/4 inch stock to create tail booms down to the tail. So then from there we go to the motors and the front of the fuselage. Now this is the next step. Hold on. Here we go. Okay, so I'm really scared because I think these motors are too underpowered and I might have to rip open this really nice carrying thing I made. It's basically like I think it's 1/32 or 1/64 inch thick balsa, extremely thin. Here it is right here. You can bend it really sharply without it breaking. Basically wrapped in a circle and capped with the motor inside. And on the underside, it's a tubing going all the way back with a slant going back to the edge on both sides. Like I said, I think it's pretty underpowered. Let me see what it is being powered by. These are Turnigy. This is the exact motor inside. So 18112900, whatever that means. It's pretty small. Wouldn't be able to fly the thing alone, but I figured maybe as a twin, it might be able to fly. Just because the speed won't be a problem. It's just a torque. The torque is the problem. Just getting the plane to the speed. Like one of the things I considered was that these props, or not props, these motors were designed for 5-inch props, and these are 5x3s. So I figured that's probably the best motor for the props, and can't really go much bigger, else I'll start to strike the fuselage. So there's that, but then again, they're running on 6-amp ESCs, so that's that for you. Very small. But yeah, so I guess what I'm gonna do is just see if it works, and if it doesn't, I'll put them back on the quad, and at that same place, I'll probably end up just having to go on Hobby King and buying some more motors. So from here, I have to finish making the front of the fuselage to contain the battery, because since this is a cargo-ish plane, that's what it's evolving into, it's becoming very tail heavy, because if you look, there's only a little bit, I'd say probably about 3.5 inches sticking out in front of the nose. There's not that much for nose weight, so I'm putting a big old 2-cell 1000, which is pretty big for a 36-inch twin, not in power but in size, to try and help to bring the nose back down. And if that doesn't work, I'm gonna put the elevator and tail servo, or elevator and rudder servo in the nose, and just try to cram everything I can up in there so so I won't have to add any weight. And I want this thing to be as light as possible. So now I guess the next step you're gonna see is all the trestling is gonna be fixed. All the 1/8 by 1/8 is gonna be laid down here, and then this front is gonna be finished with the Lexan windows laid on there. And I'm probably going to be starting on the landing gear, and it's going to be this nose wheel, I believe probably somewhere here or even under it. And I have these two small tail wheels, and they're just going to be sitting right at the base of the plane like that. So next you're going to see is that. Alright, day 3 of this balsa plane thing. Still don't know what to call it. Here, I got the ailerons working. You can see here. You can see those special hinges I made working well. Yeah, here it is on the other side as well. And I also got the twin motors working. How I did that is basically the receivers I was using. This is one of them up here. Turnigy 6 amp plus. Oop, upside down. 6 amp plus ESC. Has a BEC in there used for the two servos here and the two servos for the rudder and elevator. And I hope it's not too much for this little tiny receiver, or ESC, but whatever. So basically what I'm doing is the ESC is also in this tube here. This is the BEC ESC, and that runs the 3 wires, signal, positive and negative, all the way down to the receiver. This one is just the ESC for this motor. So how that works is the 3 wires, the black, red, and white, going back to the receiver. The red one is cut because the only thing that actually powers this motor, or not, no, that's not right. The only thing that tells the motor what to do is the white signal wire. The red wire is used for the BEC. That's the BEC. And the thing powering the motor is the actual power supply. The red and black wires going back to the battery leads. So if you cut that red wire, you no longer have a BEC not powering the servo. So to not have a double BEC, there's just one in this motor powering the ailerons, and that seems to work. So here, I'll turn them both on for you. I had to take the props off. These are the 2 prop adapters because they're severely imbalanced, so I have to figure something out with that. So that's a good sign. I don't know if you can hear it on the computer. It's easier to hear it with the ear in person. But when you get to the full RPM of the motor, you can really hear the 2 being almost exactly identical in pitch, which means that the power thrust per wing side is going to be really similar, which is a good thing. So that's good. I guess. Oh yeah, and I also have the front nose landing gear just tucked under there. It's turnable and it's connected to this control horn at the top. So it's sort of set up like that. So now I have to set up the rear landing gear, which is just going to be rollers. I figured I had to make something steerable on the landing gear just because these aren't differential thrust. I guess I can't do that with my tactic, but that's alright. yeah, so, yeah. Okay, so I found out the problem with these prop adapters, why they were so, sorry, that's my cat. Why they were so off balance. Turns out they actually weren't. What the problem was is that the prop shaft on these motors, 2mm, they were too small. So any little bit of vibration, even if it was almost perfectly balanced, it would just, like the domino effect, it would just get more and more off balance just because it had that little bit, and it would just throw it around because the prop shaft wasn't strong enough to keep it in true. Just because this was such a big assembly for the size of the motor. So I ended up using the props that came with the motor. Same size, I believe they're 5x3s, except they just friction fit onto the shafts. So what I did is I took this guy that was the size of the shaft, made it pointy at the tip. Here, hold on. Anyway, it's pointy at the tip. I drilled out these props, slid them on easily, and then zapped them on there. It's not the best way, but it works. So here you go. There we go. And something to hold it down. So yeah, seems pretty nice. I think it might have enough to take it off the ground. So yeah, now I'm gonna go on to the finishing of the landing gear and rudder setup, that thing. Just a quick video about the front landing gear. I hooked it up to a servo with a ball link, so there's less slop, and with the power, the turning radius is pretty insane. So here, check it out. So yeah, that's the turning radius. Okay, so now I have the ailerons true to center. Props are running perfectly symmetrical to each other. I have a new nose. What I did is I had that flat nose originally, and then I took some soft balsa, soaked it in hot water, and then slowly worked it into this curve, and it worked out pretty nicely. I have a bit of Lexan plastic I use for the window. It's not really, but it'll just keep the wind from going into the plane. You can see I have the ball joint to the steering. That's always been there. Let's see, what else is new? I hooked up the tail and elevator. You can see it, these two servos. Now my favorite part about the tail is how I ran this 9-gram servo. Hold on. You can see the blue 9-gram. One of the wires goes out to the rudder, and the other wire goes down to the nose gear. So when one moves, it pushes them away or pulls them both, so it goes opposite. So here, let me just hold the film for a second, and I'm going to turn it on. Okay, so we have focused. We have throttle. That's about a third throttle right there. And I was nervous before about whether these motors would have enough power to take off because they're extremely tiny for this plane, but turns out it actually has a decent amount of power. I did a taxi test earlier today and it worked out pretty nicely. But anyway, so here you can see the wheel turning with the rudder. And at the same rudder, it's also moving the rear rudder. And if you're doing this, it's really a good idea to make sure that the rudder is in like true along with the wheel, because if like let's say the wheel is turned to the right while the rudder is centered when you land, it's just going to veer to the right, and you don't want that. So you have to make sure that they're both completely true or maybe both turn to the right or whatever, and just make sure that you can trim it from your remote. So you saw the rudder right there, and then here's the elevator. Unfortunately, I had this crappy little 6-gram that I found, and the gears in there are old, so it squeals. But that's alright. So that's all with the electronics. If I flip it over, see, I have a nifty little hatch. You see the nylon hinges. If I just pop it, it just sort of slides right open really nicely. So that works really good. And the battery, it's sort of sloppy how it works. It sort of crams in right in front of, or right behind the front landing gear. But so now this has all been tackled. All the electronics are good. It's ready to. I don't have to add any more electronics. I'll say that much. Now what I have to do is I have to cover it. Now I'm going to be using silk span. It's like silk tissue paper, basically. Silk tissue paper with clear mixed with gray dope. So it's going to have like a gray cargo plane sort of look. And that should be alright. And if I need extra, I have some white. Meant to be used with the fluorescent, but it should be fine. So I'm going to thin it down just a little bit with water. And then I'm going to apply it with the spray. So I'll probably just film the first bit of me covering the wing, and then I'll go from there. So yeah, we'll do that now.